All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Jeremy McLaughlin. I am the current chair of the ASIS student chapter here at San Jose State. I'm really genuinely excited about our presentation and discussion tonight, and I'm happy to see a lot of new and familiar faces in attendance. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping notes and some announcements. I am copying a bit.ly link into the chat box now. This is a short survey that we would really appreciate it if all the attendees could fill out for us. If you want to open that now or just open it later, I will show it again towards the end of the presentation. But this is just a short event survey that we like to gather some information about why you attended the event, and it just helps inform us going forward, and we really appreciate the feedback. So if you could do that, that would be great. Second, if you are at all interested in getting involved with ASIS, we're currently accepting nominations for a few positions, and we're always accepting new members. So please feel free to drop us an email at sjsuassist@gmail.com. Or in your event survey response, if you'd like, there's a comment section. You can just put any interest that you have in joining the executive committee or joining ASIS in general in that event survey as well. And we'd, again, really appreciate that. I wanted to thank specifically the SLA, Special Library Association Student Chapter, for co-sponsoring and helping to publicize our event tonight. Shante Santos, who's the chair of the SLA student chapter, has joined us, and if she's ready, I'm going to go ahead and just turn off my mic and turn it over to her for a moment for a few words.
Hi, thank you, Jeremy. I'm Shante. I'm the president of the SLA student group at San Jose State. We are so happy to be co-sponsoring this event. We're still a pretty new group, so big thanks to Jeremy and the rest of ASIS for letting us co-sponsor, and also to Dr. Simmons and Dr. Hansen for being here tonight. Like I said, we are still pretty new, but we've got some exciting things kind of coming down the pipe. So I'm going to put a little link in the chat box if you're interested in learning a little bit more about our group. We encourage you to look at our site. You can join right from the website too. So I'll put that in there right now. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Shante. It's exciting when the different student chapters get to work together, and we're really looking forward to some new programs down the road and really trying to just foster more collaboration around the iSchool, especially as it relates to the student chapters. So thanks again for helping to co-sponsor that tonight. So now I'd like to move on to our presentation, and I will be quiet and let our speakers for tonight get going. The talk tonight, of course, is ePortfolio or Thesis, What's Right for You? And I'm happy to introduce our speakers this evening, Dr. Holschuh Simmons and Dr. Debra Hansen. Michelle is a lecturer in the iSchool. She teaches classes on reference, information resources, and information literacy. She has an MLIS and PhD from the University of Iowa and is honestly a role model for online teaching and distance instruction. She's won the WISE Excellence in Online Teaching Award the last 4 years in a row. So Michelle's co-chair of the iSchool Curriculum and Program Development Committee with Dr. Linda Main. And I truly believe that she's going to be a great representative for the ePortfolio option, especially as it relates to learning objectives and how students can represent those learning outcomes in their portfolio. So thanks for being here, Michelle. Debbie Hansen is also a professor in the iSchool, currently teaching in the areas of archives, oral history, history of books and libraries, and information in society. She earned an MLIS from UCLA and her PhD from UC Irvine, where she specialized in 19th century American social and women's history. She's very well published across many platforms, including several journal articles, encyclopedia entries, conference presentations, and a 2010 published book that tells the history of the San Jose State School of Library and Information Science. Debbie understands the research, writing, and publishing processes, and again, I think she's going to be a great source of information for us tonight about how the thesis can work, and especially questions related to how that fits into sort of future goals and aspirations. Just a quick note about questions. We are going to hold questions until Michelle and Debbie have finished with their slides. We have a lot of time set aside for questions, so please feel free, though, during the presentation to type your questions into the chat box. I'm going to be monitoring that, writing them down, and once we get through with the presentation slides and get to the Q&A, I'll start by going through those questions and reading those ones off. At that point, you can also raise your hand, and we'll take questions in order from that point as well. So with that, and without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie, who is starting us off tonight with the thesis option.
It looks like Debbie might have an audio delay. I see that little icon next to her name. Debbie, are you able to hear us?
Can people hear me? Michelle,
yep,
can you hear me?
we can hear you perfectly. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Then
sure
I've been having trouble.
Great.
Am I too loud? Okay.
You sound great.
Okay, tell me if I'm too loud. Okay, I've been having weird things with my computer, so I have two computers set up. That's why you see Debbie and Debbie Hansen, Debbie H, because I'm kind of neurotic about things like this. So, anyways, that's why things seem a little strange. So let me know if you stop hearing me or if there's a problem. But I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and thank Jeremy for setting up this session on the thesis versus the ePortfolio. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk about the pros and cons of writing a thesis. I've been writing and I've been working with thesis students for many years, and I've had ample opportunity to witness the joys and the frustrations that come with trying to do original research and writing. And students often email me about the thesis option, asking me to discuss the pros and cons of taking on that kind of project, and these are the main points that I've asked them to consider. And Michelle, could you just put up my first slide? Okay, thanks. First thing, why would anyone write a thesis? You know, why take on such a big project? Well, the most important reason is that you have a fantastic idea for a thesis topic. You've gotten really excited about it. You have a burning desire to do original research and scholarly writing, and you just have a passion, and you're ready to devote, you know, the next 2 years maybe working on this. A lot of times people fall in love with the thesis topic that they come up when they take research methods, which is Library 285, which is required for everybody. And in that class, you write a thesis proposal, and a lot of students really get excited about the research that they designed for their Library 285 class, and they want to continue on and actually do the research. And so that's where most of the thesis students come from, the 285 class. A number of students in our program already have a master's degree, and a lot even, not a lot, but some even have PhDs, so they've already written a master's thesis or a doctoral dissertation, and they think of themselves as scholars, and they want to continue being scholars in the MLIS program, and maybe have a vision of being some sort of research librarian or scholar, or maybe even a professor in a library and information science program, you know, which is a career option that people don't talk about that much. But a number of people come into the program thinking of themselves as scholars, and they want to continue in that vein and write a thesis. One thing to keep in mind, though, when you write a thesis for an MLIS program, the thesis has to have something to do with library and information science. And I know that seems like a no-brainer, but you know, it's something that you have to keep in mind as you're thinking about what topic you would pursue as a library and information science student, and it's a topic that emerges from your coursework. You know, something just really catches your imagination, and you decide you really want to study that further and write something about that. Also, a thesis has to be scholarly research. It can't be a professional project. And, you know, professional project would be something like maybe digitizing a really big, fantastic archival collection, or cataloging a large collection of rare books, or another type of more applied activity that you're employing the skills that you're learning in your classes, and this can be problematic because most of our classes are teaching you theory and method to be a professional and to work in a library or other, you know, information organization. So they're teaching you the skills you need to be able to run a library, and that's not really research. And so you don't get a lot of experience doing research in your classes. And so that's something that you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about topics. It needs to be a topic that requires you to collect data and then interpret that data. Also, if you are interested in doing research, you may be interested in going on to get a PhD. I went from my MLIS program at UCLA straight into a doctoral program at UC Irvine, and you know, I just kept in school for years. I was, you know, it was a decade before I started actually working, because I just continued my education. And so if you're thinking about getting a doctorate, many doctoral programs require applicants to submit samples of their writing, scholarly writing, along with their application materials. And usually this is a master's thesis that you submit to a doctoral program so that they can evaluate your ability to do original scholarly work. Also, writing a master's thesis is really good training for writing a PhD dissertation. So if you want to write a dissertation, it's a good idea to write a thesis first so that you, you know, sort of learn the basics and understand the process. Some employers actually expect their librarians to do research and publish books and articles as part of the job requirement. This is particularly true in an academic or research library where the librarians have what's called faculty status. And faculty status means that the librarians are considered part of the faculty, which is fantastic because you have the same status and the same pay as the same, you know, working conditions as the teaching faculty, but you also have to meet their same requirements to get tenure and get promoted, and that always includes scholarly research and writing. So if you're interested in working in an academic environment, writing a master's thesis is a really good idea because you'll already have research and a body of data to work with so that you could continue writing and publishing as part of your academic job. If you'd like to work in you know, any kind of research library or special collections or special library, it's great to have personal research experience so that you're speaking the same language as the people that you're working with in the library, speaking the same language as your clientele. Having done advanced research yourself, you have subject expertise in the collections that you're working with, and you can understand what the researchers are looking for and give them scholarly direction and advice in terms of using the collections. And so it's really good to be a scholar yourself if you're going to be working in a research environment. On a less practical note, it's just fantastic to create something original and important, which is what you can do when you write a master's thesis. You you'll put in all this effort, and at the end of it, you'll have this tangible, permanent, piece of writing that's contributing to the profession, it's contributing to the scholarly literature of our field, and it's really gratifying to have that wonderful, final product, at the end of writing your thesis. You can look yourself up in the King Library Catalog or WorldCat and see your thesis listed there, and that's really very cool. So, so those are some of the reasons why you would benefit from writing a thesis. And, so now I think I'll just talk about some of the negatives. Oh, sorry, Michelle. You go ahead. Okay, thanks. I was trying to be independent, but I screwed up. So, but I wanted to talk a little bit about just some of the negatives writing a thesis, so that you're forewarned about, what you're getting into when you get yourself really excited about doing a thesis. First, and most important, writing a thesis is really challenging. Even for seasoned researchers, it's hard to do original writing. And let's face it, you're writing a multi-chapter book, and that's a huge commitment. It can take people years to write a book, and that's essentially what you're doing when you write a thesis. So invariably, a thesis will add an extra year, oftentimes more than that, to your MLIS program. And if for financial or personal reasons you need to complete your degree and get employed as soon as possible, then it might not be realistic for you to think about doing a thesis. I get a lot of students that will contact me their last semester. They're thinking, I don't want to write a portfolio. I'd much rather do something creative like write a thesis. And so they contact me, right when they're, just about ready to graduate. And I always say, don't be crazy, because you'll be spending at least another year in the program, doing the research and writing. And, and so you have to be forewarned and sort of plot that out. If you're thinking about writing a thesis, sort of take your coursework so that the timing is right in terms of when you can start working on the thesis, so it's not prolonging your degree endlessly, because it's so difficult to write this book. You also might have to travel when you do your research, and that's not really a negative, but a lot of times you have to go places to collect data. I have a student this semester who's interested in studying the role of church leaders in the development of libraries in early 19th century New England, and I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm really excited about it, but I had to tell her right away that this means probably a couple weeks doing research in Boston. And, it's not negative. It's really fun to go to Boston and do research, but it's really expensive too. And it's time consuming, and, it just complicates your life to have to do that. So, so you have to plan for sort of the time involved in a thesis and the miscellaneous expenses in doing that research. Student loans can really complicate the thesis process. When you're writing your thesis, it's really smart not to take any other classes except the thesis class, which is Library 299, and you can take Library 299 2 different semesters for a total of 6 units. but you shouldn't be taking other classes at the same time, because you want to focus all of your creative energy and all of your free time on writing that thesis. And you don't want to be distracted by assignments from another class. Unfortunately, many student loans require that students take at least 4 or 6 units to keep their loan active. And that means even though the student doesn't need to take any more classes, that the student has already finished all the units needed for the degree, they're just finishing writing the thesis, to keep their loan active, they have to take another class anyways. And the university frowns on students taking more classes than the degree requires. So it can really become a financial and a bureaucratic problem if you've completed all your classes but haven't finished writing your thesis and you have student loans to worry about. Another issue that comes up is the fact that our faculty in the school, is very diverse, and we have so many different specializations, which is great for class coverage, but it makes it a challenge to find people with the appropriate expertise to serve on different thesis committees. I'm a historian, so I'm really limited in the types of theses I can be involved with. Conversely, there's only one other historian on the school's faculty, which means it can be a challenge for my history students who need to have 3 faculty members serve on their committee to find 3 faculty, another faculty member. It can be done, and you just have to be flexible and creative, but, it can be frustrating to try to find, people that can sit on your thesis committee. And then finally, and as Michelle will talk about in a few minutes, the ePortfolio has its own unique benefits and rewards. It allows you to review your coursework and document your professional knowledge and skills. And if you have a really nicely designed, professional-looking ePortfolio that showcases your academic and professional achievements, you can use it to show potential employers, and it can be very beneficial. A thesis is much narrower in terms of what it accomplishes you, professionally speaking. Okay, could you switch the slide, Michelle? Okay, so if I haven't discouraged you from writing the thesis, think back to my first point that if you're really excited about your research topic and want to do original work, then, think about a thesis. And if you still, or would like to explore this option, here are the basic things you need to do. First, we have guidelines for writing a thesis on the school website. So you can take a look at that, and it tells you step by step what you need to do to write a thesis. Second, take research methods, Library 285, because in research methods you will write a thesis proposal, and which is what you need to do at the first stage of your thesis. Then once you get the thesis proposal written, you need to find a faculty member who has the knowledge and the interest to serve as your thesis chair. And that faculty member then will help you finalize your proposal and suggest other faculty members to serve on your thesis committee with you. And then finally, just start reading. You need to become familiar with the scholarly literature on your topic, and so the more you know about your thesis, the better you'll be able to sell it to your committee members, and the quicker you'll be able to get started. Okay, that's all I have to say, so I'm going to turn off my mic and turn it over to Michelle.
Great, thank you, Debbie, and thank you to Jeremy for the introduction and for inviting both of us here. So Debbie has done a great job explaining the advantages and the challenges of a thesis, and there are lots of advantages of doing the thesis. And I'm going to explain some of the advantages and some of the challenges for doing an ePortfolio. So I want you all to know that both of these projects have tremendous value, but they are very different. And so I think before I actually get into advantages and disadvantages, just because the ePortfolio is a little bit more unfamiliar to people, people can't quite imagine like what is this thing. I think I'd first like to do application sharing and share with you an example so that we can just take a look at what it is, and then we'll get into the more specifics with actually what the advantages and so forth are. So can you give me a smiley face if you can see the ePort handbook? I'm just opening up my Chrome window here. Can you give me a smiley face? Great, thanks, Jeremy. So the way to get to this from our website is just to go under Quick Links under ePortfolio, and this handbook is something that you're going to want to read closely. I'm going to give you the link here in the chat box. And let me then go to the examples. I just clicked on More ePortfolio Help and then ePortfolio Examples. There are some that are password protected, and then there's one that is freely available. I'm going to go into the one that's freely available. And I'm going to give you the URL, the direct URL for this example. This is a former student of mine, although I was not her ePortfolio advisor, but she is a former student of mine. And her ePortfolio is under this link. So all of these other parts that she has are actually not part of the ePortfolio. It's just this drop-down that is part of the ePortfolio, just so that you understand what here actually is the ePortfolio. So I'm going to actually just look at this first comp that she has. When it opens on comp H instead of, let's say, the introduction, which I think would be more typical. So right now, I'd just like to show you comp H. So what this is first, there is the competency statement itself, and I will show you where she got this. So she just copied and pasted this competency statement itself from the ePort handbook, and I'll show you where that is. And then there's the introduction, and some people call this the introduction, some people call it the explication. I call it the explication, and what she did here was she looked at the competency statement itself, and then she explained it, and she explained it in really thorough, specific ways. The things that I tell my students is if you could have written the explanation before you came into our program, it's not specific enough. So if you want to think of your audience as a smart but non-LIS person, maybe a spouse or a sibling or somebody like that. So basically you're just explaining what does that mean, okay? And that's, I'm sorry, I'm making you dizzy here, but that's what that first part is. Then the second part, sort of the second half of the essay, is the evidence part. And there she has 3 artifacts. So this link here is an artifact, and this one is a YouTube video that's an artifact. These artifacts are things that she has done either in her classes or perhaps outside of her classes. Maybe it is from an internship, or maybe it's from her work experience, or even from another degree, or maybe outside of school altogether, and maybe it is from maybe a club that she's a part of. Maybe she created a website for her biking club or something like that. And as long as it supports the competency and illustrates the competency, it is fine to include as an artifact proving that she is competent in this area. So in this evidence section, I ask students to have sort of 2 sections for each of these artifacts. The first is explaining or describing the artifact, kind of giving the context, and then secondly, giving an argument for why this artifact proves that she is competent in this area. And so pretty much people do generally 3 artifacts per competency, and then there's a conclusion at the end and references. Okay, so I'm going to just show you that that was Comp H. If I would go into any of these other competency essays, A, B, C, all the way through N, they're all going to be structured the same way. First an explication, first the competency statement itself, then the explication, then generally 3 artifacts with both a description and an argument, and then a conclusion and references. So that's how the essays themselves work. So those are how A through N are. Then there's an introduction, just an introduction to the whole ePortfolio, a statement of professional philosophy where people are talking about, you know, what makes them passionate about our field, a conclusion, and that's the conclusion of the whole ePortfolio, and an affirmation just saying that, you know, everything was done in an honest manner. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the ePortfolio handbook. I'm going to click on core competencies. Let me give you that link. These are the core competencies that we, the faculty, have decided by consulting with a lot of other professional organizations such as the American Library Association, the Special Library Association, as well as others. We have distilled the professional competencies down to these competencies, and we say that each graduate of the Master of Library and Information Science program is able to, and then these are the important skills or characteristics of professionals in our field. And one of the things that's great is that this shows that we in our field have a body of knowledge that is in common. So if you go to a conference and you sit down next to someone who is in our field but is in a very different part of our field, let's say you're in cataloging and you sit down next to a usability specialist, or you sit down next to a marketing person or something like that, you can still have a conversation because you have this basic set of knowledge, and you can ask them knowledgeably about their area of work because you have some competency. You've proven that you have some competency in all of these areas. Okay, so those are the core competencies right here. Then I'm just going to click on one other thing. There's this little database called Competency Map. And it's from that page. Let me just give you I'm sorry, I can't remember if I already clicked on, if I already gave you the core competencies, but I'm going to give you that, and now I'm going to give you this little database link as well. Yeah, first one might be a duplicate. This database is meant to be helpful, but I don't want you to think that it's limiting. So if you click on, let's say, Comp A, it's going to list all of the classes that have Comp A listed on the green sheet, saying that that class covers that competency. But I don't want you to think that you can't use artifacts from other classes, even if they don't have that competency listed on the green sheet. If you have an assignment from your, let's say, 210 class, I teach 210, and 210 is reference. Let's say you have a reference assignment that deals with ethics and intellectual freedom. You should most definitely use that for Comp A because Comp A deals with ethics and intellectual freedom, even though it is not listed here. So I want you to use this in the spirit that it was intended. It was intended to be helpful to you, but I don't want you to feel limited by it. Okay, you can use artifacts even if they're not, you know, if that competency is not listed on that green sheet for that class. Okay. So I think that I'm going to stop the application sharing, and I'm going to go back to our page. Okay, so with that in mind, that's a very quick introduction, and I know that was a bit of a whirlwind introduction. I want to just give you some ideas of some advantages of doing an ePortfolio. One of the main ones that I see that I take great joy in witnessing as an ePortfolio advisor is that students make connections from classes that they previously would not otherwise see. Because what students do is they review all of their work from their 202 class all the way, in their 200 class, all the way through their very final semester. And a lot of times, students discover, after they've taken all sorts of other classes, that they understand, let's say, their content from 202 so much better than they had when they even went through the class. And, you know, let's say now that they've taken their 244 online searching class, then they go back and review their notes from 200, or 202, excuse me, and I have many students who say, now I understand what my professor was saying. Now I get why I didn't do well on that assignment, because at the time I didn't get it. I didn't get how those concepts worked. But now that I have some distance and I have other knowledge that has deepened my understanding, now I understand more clearly that class that I took, let's say, 3 years ago. Another thing that's wonderful to see is that students are able to see their progress throughout their 2, 3, 4 years, however many years they spend in the program. And because they're going back all the way to the beginning of their very first class in the program. And we want to see growth. So it's okay for people to say something like, you know, at that time, my understanding of this issue was less sophisticated than it is now, but nevertheless, this artifact proves that I, have, a basic knowledge in this area, or whatever it is. And so, sometimes people are self-conscious about those very early assignments. They say, it just isn't all that good, and we say that's okay because it shows growth. That's fine. That's what we want. As long as you can make an argument saying how the artifacts are proving that you have these competencies. Another thing is that this is a great experience, or a great process to go through before going on the job market, because you are forced, you hate to say it, but forced to review and reread all sorts of things that you haven't really been thinking about, because we all get so focused on our own task at hand. Like Debbie said, she'd been in school for 10 years. I feel like, I was doing the same thing. I mean, I feel like I've been a student forever, not in the last few years, but I was before that. And I know how it is. I feel like we get tunnel vision on the classes and the assignments that we have right then. And the ePortfolio allows you to kind of sit back and look up and see your whole program holistically. And it's a great preparation for job interviews. And one of the reasons that it is that you aren't just saying, sure, I can do that. But you can say, sure, I can do that, and here are examples. Sure, I can do that. Here is evidence. Because you have gathered all the evidence. You've got it. So you can say, yes, I can do instruction. Let me show you a screencast that I did. Because you had to articulate not just describing the thing, but also making an argument for how that artifact proves that you are competent in that area. Okay, but there's always a challenge. In fact, there are always lots of challenges with any academic endeavor that we have, and an ePortfolio is definitely one that has some challenges as well. In some ways, it's sort of the flip of the thesis. It is a quick experience, because the actual writing of the ePortfolio is in one semester. It's your final semester, unless you're graduating in the summertime, in which case you take it in the spring. And you can take one class then in the summertime. But otherwise, it's your final semester, and you have to stay self-disciplined and stay on schedule, because it is a process where you are writing and turning things into your advisor is reviewing them and getting them back to you. And if you wait and wait and wait and not turn things in, it's going to be, you just won't be able to get it done by the deadline. And there is a very firm deadline. It's the third Monday in either November or April, depending on if you're taking it in the spring or the fall. It's not offered in the summer. And then secondly, you have to be really well organized. I think that it is appropriate for information professionals to have to be well organized in our digital lives. And so, you know, if you're a person that has some files over here and some files over there, and you've synced some up to Mozy and you have some in Google Drive, that probably is not going to serve you well, because you really need to have things organized. And I'll give you a couple examples of how you might organize things. So, and I'll do that in just a bit, but first let me go through a couple other ideas. In terms of what to do before your semester that you're actually taking 289. 289 is the number that you actually register for. So it's a 3-credit course, Library 289. But in the semesters before that, in fact, from your very first semester in the program on, I would suggest that maybe between semesters, maybe during winter break and during summer break, you review the core competencies, which are these, you know, that I showed you on the screen earlier. So there are the core competencies, and you just read them over. And what I would do if I were you is I would have a Word document with the statement on the top of each one. So you'd have 15 different Word documents, Comp A, Comp B, Comp C, and so forth. And I would just brainstorm, and I would think about connections that I have learned regarding that competency that semester, maybe assignments that would be useful, articles that somehow related to it, maybe blogs or websites that related to it, and I would just brainstorm and try to put those core competencies into your own words. Then if I were you, I would probably either set up a file structure on my computer so that I had a folder for each of those competencies, so one folder for Comp A, and I would drop in any artifacts that related to that comp. And that same artifact could go in maybe 3 or 4 possible folders. Maybe you wouldn't use them for all of those, but at least they related to those, and you could eventually use those. Another way you might do it, I'm a big fan of OneNote, and I've also used Evernote, but I actually prefer OneNote. And so I think if I were an MLIS student right now, that's probably what I would do. I would use OneNote, and I would have a notebook for each of the competencies, and I would just throw stuff into each of those pages as a way to keep organized and to save my stuff. It's really important to back up your material too. I probably should have put that on there. And then this was something that I mentioned, you know, earlier I mentioned that mapping page. That's what I'm referring to here. Don't feel like because Comp A is listed on this green sheet, but it's not listed on this other green sheet, that an assignment that you have for that other class couldn't be used for Comp A. It definitely can. So, you know, the important thing is that you can make an argument. If you can make an argument, go for it. You know, that is fine. You can do it, and you don't need to, you know, feel limited because it's not set up, it's not listed on the green sheet. And I just want to conclude before we open things up for questions. I just want to conclude with a quotation that I copied and pasted into my notes from one of my ePortfolio students from last year, and she gave me permission to share it with future ePortfolio students because I think it's so beautifully written, and I think that it shows both the anxiety as well as the triumph of writing an ePortfolio. So Sarah wrote, "Like many of my fellow classmates, I was extremely overwhelmed prior to beginning my ePortfolio and immersed myself in the background material provided by my ePortfolio advisor. I initially planned to find evidence for each competency and then write the competencies that seemed to come easiest to me. After realizing I had good notes from my classes and a lot of pieces of evidence, I decided to tackle each competency in the order presented. I made a schedule where I would hopefully complete 2 competencies a week in order to complete my ePortfolio prior to the deadline. However, once I wrote my first competency, I became excited and engrossed in the process. I originally expected to relearn materials and cite outside sources for each competency. But once I began writing, I came to the realization that I had retained all of the information learned and the writing was second nature when explicating the competencies. I did reference outside materials when necessary, but the majority of my introduction paragraphs came from my own notes. After I wrote my introduction to a given competency, I selected my evidence and described how the evidence demonstrated my knowledge and experience in that competency. Seeing how everything I learned during my time in the SLIS program was very exciting and encouraging, so I ended up writing more than 2 competencies a week. The ePortfolio has been an amazing experience, and I believe it has prepared me for applying to jobs in the library and information science field. Prior to this experience, I was hesitant to apply for library jobs because I did not believe I had the requisite skills to even apply, as I currently work in the legal field and do not have professional library experience. Completing my ePortfolio reminded me that I gained a lot of practical experience through my internship and other class assignments. I also believe that my ePortfolio has demonstrated my knowledge. So I just wanted to end with that because I think this is, her statement is, really captures the experience that students have. It's very common for students to come to the end of the ePortfolio and say, I feel like I have learned so much by this reflective process. So I think I'm going to stop there and turn things back over to Jeremy so that he can line us up with some questions.
The power is mine. Okay. So here we go for the questions. We did have several that came up in the chat, and I'm going to start with the one that we had from Justine dealing with the thesis. So Debbie, this one's for you. Justine mentioned that she's either coming into this semester or after the semester will have 22 credits, and she asked if it was too early for her to start her thesis project. Or I guess if you have any suggestions for when to start looking at those projects to take the 285 class, if you could just sort of reiterate your point that you made about that.
Sure. Actually, the timing is really good. You know, you need to have a certain number of classes under your belt to be able to understand what a research methods class is all about. You know, and so I think after taking 4 or 5 classes, you're ready to take research methods. Research methods, each section focuses on a different methodology, and so as I did read your question in the chat box, and you already sort of have an idea of what you want to write your thesis on. So look at the research methods classes, maybe even offered next spring, and see which ones focus on a methodology that would be appropriate for your thesis, and then take that class. There are a couple generic research methods classes just to teach you, sort of provide an overview of all the research methods. So if you're sort of vague about what your research method is, that could be a possibility. But you know, be careful in what research methods class you choose, because you'll write your thesis proposal there. And usually the next semester you will spend cleaning up your thesis proposal, finding a thesis chair, putting your committee together, and then the following semester is when you'll be start seriously writing your thesis. So and try to start writing your thesis a year before you want to graduate.
Debbie, we just had another question about the thesis. Given the unit minimum for student loan recipients, are we to take 2 unit 298 courses while we take thesis?
San Jose ruled a year or so ago that you can't do that, because we used to play that game all the time. Just take 298, and the university came down on us so that we can't use 298 for working on a thesis, unfortunately.
Okay, we had several questions that had to deal. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the last 2 chats. Okay, we had several that had to deal with the ePortfolio. So Michelle, several folks, Kate, Veronica, Justine, asked about using an artifact and doubling it up for different competencies. So I guess the basic question is, can one artifact be used for multiple competencies?
Sure. Thank you, Jeremy. And I did notice those questions, and I'm glad that you asked. Debbie, please jump in as well here, because Debbie has more experience as an ePortfolio advisor than I do. you can use one, I should preface this with, you need to check with your ePortfolio advisor, but generally you can use one artifact for two different competencies, and they're going to be showing different things. So for example, Comp M is about communication and collaboration with others, so oral and written communication. And so you might use a 204 project that you did with a group in Comp M, because that's showing that you can work with other people and that you can show some leadership and so forth. And then it might also work for Comp D, which is the one about management and so forth. So you can see that they're really different purposes, so you would be describing them, or I should say arguing them in a very different way. But you wouldn't be able to use them for, use one artifact for, let's say, 4 different comps. I don't think anything of it when students use it for 2 different comps. 3, I say, do you think you can come up with something else here? I don't know. Debbie, do you have a similar sort of policy?
Yeah, students reuse evidence for different competencies, and if they can justify how this assignment illustrates their skill in that area, I think that's fine. So I don't even have a limit, to tell you the truth, because that's never been a problem.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's it. That it really doesn't come up very often because students tend to have a lot of artifacts, and the really important thing is that you make a good argument. And if you make a convincing argument, I think your ePort advisor is probably going to say it's fine, but you need to check with your ePort advisor. I saw Danica earlier asked, can you choose your ePort advisor? And the answer is no. Dr. Linda Main assigns ePort advisors. We don't choose you, and you don't choose us. She is the one who assigns.
Great. So that was one of the other questions. Lauren Klein, if you're still on, I'm not sure that I understood your question, and had something to do with the ePortfolio, and you said really and truly no projects, and I'm not sure what the context was for that. So if you'd like to either type that out or just take the mic, and if it hasn't been answered, if you'd like to explain your question a little bit. Great. Yeah, Kate,
yeah,
I'm working
so, just talk it out. Actually, I guess, I mean, I don't know if it would fall under the thesis or the portfolio, but I was hoping to do a project the university where I got my bachelor's degree. They have a relatively large subject library that is completely uncatalogued. There's no ILS system, nothing basically, and I was hoping to put all that in place, develop their website, basically start this subject collection from scratch, which is a pretty ambitious project, and I was wondering is it all possible to do something like that, or just outright no, they have to fit into the 2 traditional options?
Hi, Lauren. I can answer that. It's an outright no, to tell you the truth. We used to actually have a project option, so we had 3 options: a thesis, project, and the portfolio. And the university did away with that, a number of years ago. So what you're describing is exactly what I was meaning when I said you can't do a project, even though it's employing all of your professional training and your skills, and it's a huge undertaking. It's not original research, so that you're collecting data and writing an analysis of that data. You can do it through a 298, which is called special projects, and you can do 298 for something like 12 units, and so you could work with somebody on that and get units for all of that work, but it can't be considered a thesis.
Debbie, I just wanted to follow up on that for clarification. What if she approached it as sort of an action research project whereby she was sort of doing a literature review and approached it as a full research project and was writing about sort of the procedural aspects and the library management aspects of setting up all of those systems? Would that still not apply if she approached it in that way?
No, if she used that project to create a research problem that then she collected data and analyzed it and wrote up her findings at the end of it, then it could be turned into a thesis at the same time she's doing that work. And so that's a perfect example of taking, say, an action research-based research methods class, which we do offer, and then working with the teacher on that to be able to construct a research project out of this professional work that you're doing. So yeah, you can work the system.
Okay, great. Yes, I just get it. You're saying that the project itself does not apply. You would have to still approach it as a thesis topic. Great. So hopefully that's a great answer for you, Lauren. Kate, I know you've got a question, so go ahead.
Hi, my question is for Michelle, and it's about the artifacts. You had mentioned that you can use artifacts to support competencies even if the class the artifact came from didn't list that competency. And I wondered if there's a limit as to how many times you can do that. Use artifacts
No.
There's not. Okay, great.
No
Thank
limit.
you.
No limit. You just have to make the argument. I mean, that's what we're going to always come back to is if you don't have an argument that's strong enough proving that you're competent in that area, that's where you're going to have trouble. But, you can, if you want to be able to, if you want to make an argument that your 200 class is, helped you with instruction, which would be Comp K, that's fine. If you can make the argument and your advisor buys it, that's fine. So no, there's no limit. In fact, we don't even really look at that, honestly. I mean, like, I sort of know which comps are for each class, but it's not like I check that while I'm working with ePort students at all. And I'm just going to respond to Marcia's question because she mentioned the core classes changing, and that just relates to this. So, Marcia, it really doesn't affect the ePort because the important thing is that you need to make your argument with whatever artifacts you have to prove that you're competent in these areas of the core competencies. So some people are going to use some artifacts, some people are going to use other artifacts, but that doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you make an argument that's clear that your advisor buys.
And just one more thing along those lines. I'm not sure, Marcia, if you're in the new core or the old core, but in the new core, we were very, very conscious of making sure that the new core covered all of the competencies. So if you just take the core classes, you could have like an artifact that for almost every single competencies, because we were very careful about that.
Okay, we're going to continue with questions, but captions, I did just want to let you know that if you do need to leave, because it is 8 o'clock now, thank you for your help tonight, and but please feel free to leave if you do need to, just to let you know the time. So, Lori, we've got a lot of folks with similar names. Lori H, L-O-R-I. I know your question had to do with taking the classes. If your question has not been answered yet, could you just raise your hand and we'll come back around to you? I wasn't sure if we'd gotten around to answering that. Okay, so...
Hey, Jeremy.
Yep.
We do have Danica Rice here tonight, and she is hearing impaired, needs the captioner, so I wasn't sure if, because she'd like to stick around and she wants to hear what we're talking about.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't trying to...
Chris Rodriguez.
Yes, okay, understood. Yeah, I wasn't trying to certainly cut anyone off or cut anyone
No,
off.
I totally understand. I just thought
I
I'd
just want to make
mention
sure, yeah, we're just aware of the captioner's time. So hopefully the captioner can stay, and I'm sorry to those of you who need them if they can't. I apologize. Sorry, we're going back. So Lori had a question, but she put her hand back down. So I'm going to move on to Justine, if you'd like to take the mic.
Hi, I just had another question for Michelle. I've been pretty good about keeping record of all the files I create, like all the essays and pretty much anything I originally create on my computer or websites. But I was wondering, as far as a lot of the things that we do in our classes, it takes place on a discussion board. So should we be screenshotting those or just copy and pasting into a Word document? What should we be doing with those?
Good question. First, I want to preface this with, don't panic if you haven't been saving your discussion posts, because for the most part, people have plenty of artifacts just with their main assignments in their classes. Most of the time, if people are going to use their discussions, it's sort of to fill in, you know, maybe they have two artifacts, but they don't really have a strong third one, and they use a discussion post as their third one. And it doesn't really matter how you save them. You can do screenshots if you want. I would say that would be kind of clumsy, I think, because then it's not actually text, it's an image. And so if you would like needed to search for a word, it wouldn't be there, you know, all of that. So if I were doing it myself, I would probably copy and paste into, so that it's text, into a Word document. You know, I can't remember offhand right now how that works in Canvas. If you can, I think you can copy and paste, you know, like the whole discussion. If you want, you could save, you know, the whole discussion or just your portion of it. If you save the whole discussion, basically what you're doing is providing a little bit of context around, you know, your one you know, response or post. But of course, it's your post that's the important part. But it would just kind of remind you, like, oh yeah, that's what that discussion was about. So I don't think it really matters, but you know, yeah, I would say if, you know, in one of your classes, for example, in my classes, I always have one lesson where we're talking about ethics. And so that's kind of a no-brainer, like, wow, I really should save this for Comp A, you know. And so then, yeah, go ahead and save it. But don't feel bad if you haven't been saving them for all along. Sure, you can save them in PDF. I think that's fine, too.
Okay, Lori H., go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I guess I wanted to just clarify my question rather than, it's not really a new question. I was just wondering, before I was asking about the 2-unit class, and so I understood the answer about how they didn't want the 2 units to go toward the thesis, but I was saying in addition to the 6-unit thesis class, because I think you were saying that we have to have 8 units. I mean, I'm not sure with the student loan. I think it's just 6 units, because I think you have to have a minimum of 6 units. So if each class is 3 units, would that not be enough for the student loan? So if the thesis class is, I guess I wasn't clear on how many units the thesis class was. I thought she said 6, but then I was like, well, maybe she said 4, and that's why I was thinking I needed a 2-unit class. So I just needed clarification.
Yeah, the different loans have different requirements in terms of minimum number of units. So some require 4 units and some require 6. So it depends on the student loan you have. So if you have, if you're taking the thesis units, which is, you know, 3 units for $299, and you have to have 6 units, it means that the university and or your loan company will make you take another class in addition to your thesis, even though you don't need that class, and it distracts you from the writing of the thesis. And you can't use $298 as a way to get 3 extra units. So you're kind of stuck.
Great. Any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand, type in the chat box. Go ahead, Chris. Oh, it's in the chat box. Sorry, Chris, did you have a question?
Yeah, I actually saw Chris's question. She asked if you could time it well so that you could do an internship while you're writing your thesis. That's a fantastic idea. Of course you can. And then you don't have written assignments and deadlines and stuff. You're just going and getting practical experience at the same time you're writing a thesis. I love that solution.
Chris, why don't you go ahead and, if you can, take the mic if you want to ask your question. Or feel free to type it out. Yeah, sorry if we missed your question. They're trying to keep track of everything that's kind of flying by at this point. Well, I think we'll, oh wait, maybe we did take the question. Okay, do we need to provide additional evidence if we are using artifacts from our undergrad? I'm thinking of some right now, but it's from a leadership during that time period, not in a class.
I'll answer that, and Debbie, if you want to jump in as well with your perspective. If it is something that you have done, it would be fine. You know, you have to have something physical. You can't just say, I was, you know, the president of this club and then not have a thing to show for it. So like a video of you speaking or, you know, whatever the thing is fine. But it doesn't matter if it's from a class. So, you know, it's still you. That's the important part. And if it's from undergrad or grad, a different degree or whatever, that's not the issue. The issue is that it's you were the person doing it. So you were the responsible party for the artifact, and that you can make an argument proving that it shows that you are competent in this area. Yes, Kate, that's fine. You can use student chapter activities. You know, you have to have a thing to show. So you can't just say, I was president. You know, you have to, you know, have something. Something for which you were responsible, I should say. So like a letter of recommendation that someone else has written, I don't think works. It's that you have to have done it. Okay, good. Thank you, Chris, for letting me know. Okay, anything else that Debbie or I could help you with?
Kate does a ton of good work for us, so I'm sure she'll have lots of things to use from ASIS for her ePortfolio. Well, yeah, with that, I'm just going to say thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Thanks to Michelle and Debbie for putting on such a great talk and for answering all of our questions and you know, dealing with some of the inherent difficulties with the chat and microphone, you know, having both going on at the same time. So thank you guys so much. I've put the bit.ly link. Please, again, everyone who attended, we'd really appreciate it if you could fill that out and just let us know about the event tonight. Again, I'm going to say it. Thank you again to Debbie and Michelle. We really, really appreciate your time and putting this all together for us. And so with that, if no one else has any other questions, obviously if you do, feel free to reach out to us, or I don't want to throw them under the bus, but Michelle or Debbie will probably be can help answer questions as well if you do have anything. We appreciate you attending tonight and look forward to seeing you all at some future ASIS events down the road. So thank you all again.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks to all of you for being here. Good night now.